I been working on the railroad of life to broadcast. All right. Now streaming live, and we're going to hit the record button. All right, this is Sports for Real with Coach Hall. Just to look back at a few things that occurred over the weekend with the NFL playoffs and some personal stuff. If you happen to look behind me, you'll see the sign that says Otis Mason Elementary School. Well, that is an elementary school in St. Augustine, Florida, right at the close to the intersection of 295 of I-95 and 207. Like I say, that's in St. Augustine. And a lot of people know that this person is a great educator. You don't normally get schools named after you unless you've done something great. Well, it just so happens this just is happens to be my uncle, and I've known him most of my life because of the age differences and different avenues of life. I rarely saw him, but when I did see him, I always appreciated him. It was something about him, but I didn't quite know. And before I get to that, let me tell you the first time that I went to his house. I can recall it vividly because it had something to do with football. Way back in 1980, it's the first time I remember going to Dr. Mason's house, and this was in the playoffs. That year, the Atlanta Falcons were the number one seed in the NFC, and they just happened to host the Cowboys. Pretty good football game. But you can tell that the Falcons, that was their year. They were up for most of the game, and it came down to the end where all they needed to do was get a first down. Well, on third down, the Cowboys, they want to come out to Bartkowski, and I think it was Hollywood Henderson. It wasn't Too Tall Jones, it was Hollywood Henderson. He comes off the ball, but he came off early. So instead of going offside, he skirted over to his left to prevent from going offside. And just that time, Bartkowski snapped the ball, and Henderson ended up in the hole where the ball was going. I mean, how lucky can you get? I mean, first he was going to run off sides, and it didn't happen, and he ended up skirting down the line, and that caused the play to be destroyed. Atlanta punted, and the Cowboys came down and scored. Danny White was a quarterback at the time, and they ended up stealing that game from the Falcons. The Falcons, they don't normally have top-seeded teams. It's only been a handful of times over the 60-plus, 50-plus years that they've been in the league, and that was an opportunity that they wasted. And it doesn't matter how you win the game, even though if you're not the better team, but if you're in the position to be competitive, anything can happen. And on that night, it happened for the Cowboys. And the Falcons, it took them a long time before they got over that. But during those times, we're still talking about Otis Mason here. Kids didn't get into adults' conversations. Now kids feel like they jump right in like they, equals. Not the case back then. My granddaddy was in his mid-70s at the time, and Dr. Mason, he's 20-something years behind him, but the mindset of the people were different back then. So the kids didn't say very much. But as I looked around, I could tell there was something about this person. But I didn't really know how bad he was until I started finding out some of his accomplishments when they had the funeral last weekend. His daughter, Pam, got up and spoke, and she said some things that I wasn't aware of. Like me, he's a hustler, but he had a purpose in his hustle. He's doing sports. He's working odd jobs. He's doing all kinds of stuff to make things work, all at the same time while keeping his education at the utmost. Same kind of stuff that I'm doing right now. Not saying that I'm anywhere close to the level of what he's doing. Matter of fact, as she reads the accomplishment of all the things that he's done, it pales in comparison to anything I thought I'd done. So it gives me the inspiration to get up and go do something, because that would have been something he would have really liked to see. And you could tell that because even though I didn't see them a whole lot over the years, but I would often run into them, especially like at the homecoming at FAMU. They always be down at the East End Stadium where the students sat back on the far end. It seemed like they were just standing there waiting to see whoever they can see, and just so happened 2 or 3 times I run into them right there at that spot. And I see my aunt, she have her hands out. She see me before I see her and come give her a hug. That was cool. But I got some memories from Dr. Otis Mason, St. Augustine. And like I said, you don't know what kind of person you're dealing with until you really find out all the accomplishments that they have. And he had plenty. I'm not going to get into all of that, but I just want to give you the tribute of how I felt about my uncle and the accomplishments that he had. And that's why I put the sign behind me here. But just to recap what took place this weekend, Baltimore and Kansas City is all the rage. Everybody was talking about Baltimore was going to win a championship. Baltimore was the best team in the league. Baltimore blew out San Francisco. They beat all the other top teams in the league. But I've been trying to tell people all along, the regular season is a completely different animal than the playoffs. For whatever reason, seemed like Baltimore kind of changed what they do a little bit in the playoffs. Now, they got lucky last week in playing against a team that wasn't really able to take advantage of the things that they can't do. But what Houston did do, they showed you in the end of that second quarter there how to get to that quarterback. You can't rush blindly and not have some kind of backup plan to have him stay in that pocket. You want to keep him in the pocket, but at the same time, you got to stop the run. I told you in a couple of videos ago that if you're going to beat the Ravens, the first thing you must do is stop the running game, not Lamar Jackson. If you can slow that running game, and then when you rush the quarterback, you have to do it in a way where you keep your lanes. So when he flushes from the pocket, you still got him pretty much contained. But the irony of the thing, people always say that, he runs too much. And I had somewhat of the same criticism, but I wasn't saying what he couldn't do. I'm saying what I like to see him do. And what I like to see him do is throw the football, because at some point you're going to have to stand in there and throw it. And you saw that in the game against Kansas City. But the irony I'm talking about is like that third down and like 1 in the fourth quarter toward the end down there, Kansas City plastered it perfect. There's nowhere to throw the ball. But he's still standing back there trying to look for somebody to throw to when all he had to do was take off. Now, remember, in man coverage, once those guys turn their back, if Jackson takes off, he's up for a big gain. But for whatever reason, that particular time, he did not take off. And it's got me wondering why. It reminds me of a game a couple of years ago when they played Tennessee. When they played Tennessee, the Titans pretty much beat them at the same game. But the difference there was all throughout the season, Jackson was throwing a lot of touchdown passes. But if you looked at those touchdown passes, a lot of those passes were off target. Those receivers really made him look good. But in the playoff game, he was more on target than he had been all season long, but those receivers were dropping the ball. So the irony seems to bite the Ravens. But you know what? I did see some good stuff from Jackson. He stood in there. I saw him look the safety off and hit that deep pass down the sideline to Flowers. It was a lot of good stuff there. I've seen a lot of growth from the Titan playoff game to where he is now. But that interception he threw in the end zone, he's so used to throwing it to the tight end, he's going to force it in there. And that guy was triple covered. Well, if he's triple covered, who's open? So when I say throw the football, and when you have to throw the football, you got to be in the mindset you want to swing it all the way around the field. But he's only throwing to certain people. He's throwing to the tight end, he's throwing to the back out of the flat, and if he throws, he's trying to throw deep. You got to get more of a variety of a passing game if you're going to affect other teams in the playoffs. But as of right now, teams tolerate the Ravens in the regular season, but in the playoffs, it's a different story. And I've been saying that all the time, all year long. I've been telling you, Baltimore has to prove that they can throw the football when it counts the most. And at this point, they still haven't shown they can do it. Case in point, the difference between Baltimore and Kansas City, when Kansas City had to hit that first down to seal the game to Valdez Scantling, they hit it. He had been dropping passes all year long, but when it counted the most, they made the play, and that is the difference. Now, who knows what will happen if Flowers don't fumble on the goal line or if Flowers don't get that penalty. Not saying that Flowers is at fault for the game. I think it's a whole collective effort of why the Ravens lost, but it just don't seem to be aligned for them right now. And just like that play when the Cowboys avoided the offside penalty by sliding down the line, he fell right into the right spot. And there's nothing you could do about it. It was just pure fate. And that allowed the Cowboys to advance. And now you see Kansas City going back to the Super Bowl. And this is the fourth time in 6 years? And this time they're going to get a rematch with the 49ers. The 49ers, they're not looking too good. They shouldn't have beat Detroit. They shouldn't have got by Green Bay. But at the same time, they're here because they kept fighting. They kept fighting till things bounced their way. And in the end, it did bounce their way. They're living on 9 lives. But I tell you what, you can't expect that to happen with Kansas City. If they come out jiving and fall down by 3 touchdowns, lights out, Jim. It's over with. Kansas City going to repeat. I'm not calling a choice right now, but I'm going to wait for that. But I'm just telling you straight up, if San Francisco hopes to win, they need to get back to the point where they're hitting on all cylinders. I still stand by the fact that when San Francisco is hitting on all cylinders, they're the best team in football when they're hitting on all cylinders. But you hadn't seen that in the playoffs. You've seen it in spurts. But those spurts were just enough to get them through to the next round. Now they got 2 weeks to get it together. But again, if they don't show up, they're going to get knocked off. But Detroit's got to be kicking themselves. It's great to go for it on 4th down all the time, but sometimes you just got to play the percentages. And I think what Campbell did, he kind of got his chances crossed. The time he should have went for it, right at the end of the half, he didn't. He kicked the field goal. And the people were saying he should have kicked the field goal right here at the end of the game. But they still had to come down to the onside kick. There's no guarantee you're going to get it, especially with these onside kick rules. So the one time that he should have went for and didn't, that was before halftime. And I think that came back to bite him. But again, fate plays a big part of it. Here's a guy get hit in the face, man. The ball pops up in the air. Frisco catches the ball. Then you got the fumble. Then you got people dropping passes. Hey, man, you got to squeeze it. When you count the most, this is the time that you have to make some plays, and Detroit did not do it. So going to hear a lot of talk about the Super Bowl in the next couple of weeks. So keep your ears peeled for that. But I would like to mention something about the coaching changes that is taking place. You have Bill Belichick, who is still on the market. He applied, going back to Atlanta, he applied to be with the Falcons. And they talked with him for a couple of days, and they have decided to go in a different direction. They actually hired Raheem Morris. So Belichick, the oldest coach, just like Pete Carroll, out on the street. So it's let me know that they're kind of moving away from these older guys and going to the younger guys, which I think is a good thing. Belichick's been a head coach for how long? 30 years, 25, 30 years? Let some of these young guys make some of that money, man. I mean, what you going to do? Be like Bear Bryant or somebody and pass away a week after you quit coaching? What good is that? Let some of these young guys go in and see what they can do, and you go and sail on off into the sunset, you and Nick Saban and Pete Carroll. But the competitive fire is still there for all of them, so I don't see that as a possibility. But it's just kind of interesting to see that somebody with the pedigree of a Bill Belichick, he still has to go in and compete for a job with all these young people when he should be able to pick where it is that he wants to go. But it also sends Belichick a message because he should be able to pick where he wants to go. These other people are saying to him, no, you got to compete just like everybody else. So in other words, you got to change and grow like everybody else. So having said that, I expect Belichick to sit back and survey the landscape. And if he's going to come back and coaching, he'll be back next year. But if not, hey, it was a great run. So until then, I'll keep you posted. And this has been Sports for Real. We out. Stop record. Peace.